not been able to join us today, and dismiss just to let everybody know that we're going to record this and share with others. So thank you everybody for coming. This is the meeting for the change management team. We have a couple of new faces, but I'm not going to put them on the spot quite yet to introduce themselves. We'll get a chance a little bit later. So what I wanted to cover today, Ramona is not going to be able to join us. She has a she was going to try to join if she can, but she's in an all-day executive meeting. So what I would like to cover today is just provide an overview of the maturity models that we're doing on WISE overall, and then talk about how this change management capabilities assessment fits into that, and what kind of needs to be, what are the inputs to that and the prerequisites, and then talk about the next steps for our team. So this is the business, sort of high-level business process for the steps that would be taken. At the very beginning, we were just trying to start some improvement, and we would start with defining the scope, whether it has to do just with people or it has to do also about business processes and technology, which would then take this this route. And each of these, whether it's workforce, a business process, or technology, has its own little tool to look at assessing maturity, the current of the as-is situation. So that's this first block in our improvement methodology, is to look at how we're doing now on a scale from 1 to 5 in these different aspects. So the overall, these three assessment methods provide us an insight in what's happening inside with the workforce and organization and processes and technology. And then change management is sort of around it, and it receives inputs, and it has its own tool as well. So let's get, so these are different categories that are of aspect of maturity for the organizational culture and workforce, for the business process, and for technology. So these are really this first step of assessing system maturity. So we looked at workforce and organizational culture and process and technology, and we get some assessment where we are. And we would do that as a first step before we get to looking at change management. So if the scope of improvement is, business process or technology, we would start by just selecting a business process so that our work is focused on a business process, not try to improve like the organization as overall. So the maturity model for that business process includes these 5 components. Is it the process we're trying to improve simple? Is it highly complex with many people involved, like asset management? What is the impact, for example, if something goes bad? Is it low and limited impact, or is it broader or maybe critical? And how much do we know about this process? Do we know a lot about it? We have it documented, or we don't really have documentation? And what are the goals we're trying to achieve? Have they not defined or well defined? And do we use currently these measurements for, do we have measurements, and are we using them to manage performance? So those are also typically things that if one wanted to improve process, it's a good idea to know, just to know what you're facing. And if you actually wanted to implement technology, these are the things that the technology people would want to know about. So the maturity assessment for business processes identifies areas of concern, but if we want to perform analysis, we require a different type of model. And this is this, instead of a maturity model, it is a system model. So the system model we use for business processes follows the BPMN 2.0, Business Process Model and Notation 2.0, which is an ISO standard that has defined elements for actions, systems, artifacts, and decisions. These are decisions. So we can use that to analyze the business process. And a diagram like this will tell us a lot about it, which measurements are used, which metrics are impacted, what decisions need to be made by whom, who's involved with these swim lanes, workflow, resources, technologies that we use, like these little computer things, what data is required to execute work, and where that data resides. So this is a model for as-is situation from Grand Rapids, and that it was used to analyze the as-is state. But then once we're done with the analysis, we move to the designing the to-be state. So this is how they designed an improved to-be process that would overcome the problems and the issues in the existing process. So this is on the process side. So when we start talking about change management is when we really think about planning and implementing improvements. So we have this set of maturity models and the analytical models that can be used to define the change, that are actually used to define the change and to see that the change is aligned with business process goals. So that's because we've done that in these previous cycles. So then these would be inputs to the next stage, which is to look at change management. And we would start, once we have from these assessments, we'll identify the changes that are needed for improvement. It would be the workforce side, process side, technology side, and also we'll get that kind of information from the analysis. So this conducting this change management capabilities will tell us what is our capability to manage change. So when we plan change, we're aware of the needed change and what are our current capabilities to manage the change. So that is sort of how what we're doing now fits into the overall context. So what we are starting with is a draft of that tool to conduct the assessment of change management capabilities that is built around 5 categories. Each one of these maturity models typically has different aspects and categories. So then currently we have a first draft survey of 28 questions to assess the capabilities that have to do with leadership and vision, communication strategies, change process, employee skill and capacity, and executing change. So that's where we are right now, is we're building this step. So the once we complete this survey, then we can analyze the results, see where our weaknesses and strengths are, and then we would use these results also to as input to planning change. So the topic of what we're talking about today, where we are right now, is on this, designing this step to conduct the assessment of change management capabilities. So the currently these statements, we have a set of these statements that would be then for each one of them, we would go, well, where are we on the maturity scale from 1 to 5? An example for the first one, leadership and vision, is shown here. So that gets us to the point, how are we going to go forward? We're starting with this draft and straw man, and our first task is to finalize these questions to make sure that they're appropriate, and to also develop a tool to analyze the results. So this is the first task, to clean up this these questions to get agreement on them. And how are we going about this? We're going about this that we put together several pages in Mural. At our previous meeting, people provided different notes, and so these are the questions that we had, and also they could make general comments, or if there is if they wanted additional statements that we didn't include. So we're trying to get more feedback like this. This is the feedback that came from one of our meetings, and is an example of how we would like people who are interested in contributing our efforts to finalize this tool, this assessment tool, to provide their input this way. So this is just to give you a little bit more idea what it was like, what the comments were like. People said, well, this is an additional question that they wanted to add. This was a question: is there a guiding committee, and are the right people a part of it? These are the comments that people were putting in. In general, it is very useful to have comments that are questions like, how about this, how about that? What is also especially useful, if somebody says, I propose this, or I propose that, then we can, it's easier to come to implement the change. This is just another type of example of comments that people have left. So this is the folder for today's meeting, and what is posted to that folder is this presentation. I will post the recording as well, and it includes the document that describes, that is a guide to this, how to go through, how to deal with Mural and how to deal with this. And from that, in the appendix of that document are links to each one of these Mural pages that you could access. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, I don't see any hands up. If you in the upper part of the screen, there's a thing called reactions with like a icon that looks like this. So if you'd like to make a comment, you can raise your hand, and then we'll stop and discuss. So what we were hoping was that people would go to, let me see, I cannot do it. I can post, I will post these links after I'm done with the PowerPoint presentation. I can't extract a link right now, because if I clicked here, it would actually bring the document, but that's not what I want to do. So that's, then our next task after we are done with this is to conduct this survey in an organization, pilot in an organization, to see how it goes, apply it to a specific business process that we want, not for the whole agency, and then see what kind of results we're getting, and from these surveys, and how useful they are. So task 2 would be to develop that tool that will allow us to analyze these results more effectively. It will be done in Power BI. And then task 4 will be okay, we've conducted these surveys, so how do we use these results to plan change? And then after that, we're going to also see from these results and from the experience is, do we want to change and modify, because these questions and the survey, to make it better. And the last, so then when we have, in addition to these assessment tools for people, process, and technology, when we have this will be used in these later phases of improvement to plan improvements, implement and monitor performance. And our goal is to integrate these things in change management with the traditional project management activities, because both are processes for the best results. So what we're going to do after that in task 6 is to look at this task to plan change and flesh it out similarly to the way we've done the one for the other top for like assessing capabilities, and maybe implement things like what is the process to develop an effective communication strategy for training and for implementing a change support structure. So these are the slides that I was hoping to use, that are intended to use to help us have a discussion about proceeding with thing. And I see that Joel has his hand up.
Thank you, Cello, but I think Scott had his hand up before I did.
You go first, Joel.
Okay. Cello, I want to let you know, whoever was involved in building this presentation, I think this is a great approach. I think there's a lot of very good material and very good sequence of developing this change management planning process. And if I'm getting into the weeds on this, just let me know. But looking at the task 1 that you've defined here in this presentation, it's that this team would develop the assessment, and that's the area that we're working on. And a step 2 or a next step would be to actually conduct the assessment. Has there been any thought given to how we identify who would take the assessment?
Yes, the idea is that we would try to, instead of saying what is the capability of the organization for change in general, we were thinking our approach would be to look at what for a selected business process we would say, and it could be, let's say that it's procurement. What is our what is our ability to make changes to the procurement process? So if we looked at the inputs before we start assessing the capability for let's say fixing procurement or making changes to the procurement, this exercise of actually mapping who's involved in the procurement with these swim lanes and what is the answering these questions would be very helpful. And then if we also have a design that says, okay, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, so that we have a transition and we say the changes that we want, and we also looked at the workforce situation. We say, okay, we currently we're trying to go from this to that, and this will tell us what the impacts would be on the processes, on the technologies, on the people, and that would be then. So who would be participating in that is a person who would be maybe managing the like, let's call it a change manager, somebody, or a change management team would be then including all the people in all the swim lanes, everybody who's involved in these processes. Does that make sense at all?
Actually, it does. And I would offer the thought that the initiative or the project sponsor, I think, would be a good role to present this assessment to and ask them for their input into it. I've had experience in the past where my organization may not have realized the potential benefit of change management, but I'm hearing a lot more in my organization now that they feel they need to be more active and designate someone to be in a change management role. So I think getting their input into an assessment would be valuable in helping create that plan moving forward. So just thought I would add that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. That we're very much we're very keen for this for the people who would actually do the pilots to be involved actively in shaping this. And even if we develop, let's say, if this tool is not something that'll be sent down on stone tablets. It's something that will be adjusted and different utilities and sometimes depending on the process that they're focusing on may modify these things to fit their specific application best. And I see that Scott and Alice have their hand up.
Alice, go ahead.
Thanks, Scott. So as we're talking through this now and seeing it in the whole big picture, I really appreciate that, Cello. What really came into my mind is that I feel like, and maybe you already are thinking of doing this or already have this, that there needs to be a step in between the 3 initial assessments of the process, the people, and the technology that is almost like a stage gate where you look at the results of all of that and say, like, is this change even possible? Like, are we ready for it? Do we need to do a lot of background work on this before we can even think about starting? I don't know what Materials Wise is kind of planning to put into that sort of, making it clear that it's not just simply like get these assessments, then do this change management thing, then plan. Especially since I saw in the plan, it was about sort of communication and I forget the 3 boxes you had, but again, nothing that's saying like, are we ready? Is this actually even possible? And is there a sequence that this needs to happen in that we can't even start until we like get more trust from our employees or, whatever it is. So just kind of asking if that was
No, I think that it's an excellent point. We have a stage gate approach for CIP. So it's an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea. And one of the things that we can do is that we've been also planning to do, I didn't put everything into this slide deck, is that we would need to have guidelines that say what kind of, like, let's say when you come to this stage gate, who should be at the table? What it would be the process for reviewing this and how, so especially for utilities who may be smaller and may not have the internal resources to do this. So if they need to hire a consultant or a facilitator to help them, that they have something that is kind of like at least almost like a draft scope of work that can be done internally or can be done externally. So they don't have to like reinvent the wheel because there are, every time they do it, and they can also, so they can use that kind of document either for the internal people or for external people. So that makes complete sense, Alice. I put the note down, and next time I'll include the stage gate, and then we can discuss, whether the stuff at the stage gate is proper or not. So thank you for that, Scott.
When I raised my hand, I didn't see any other hands up, and I just wanted to make sure that we were getting this kind of participation. But, not a few observations. One is that what Cello presented is almost the culmination of about 3 years worth of work. I was pretty amazed to see that, you know, how everything is coming together, and maybe, you know, Alice, Charlie, Phil, some of the people who've been involved might appreciate that. You know, the second thing is Joel's comments. I mean, he must be really smart, because to take that information and say, now I understand. Now, am I right that this is what we're talking about, the role of these different pieces in change management? I thought that was extremely perceptive, because that was exactly what we're talking about, is following a change management process, but kind of assessing our readiness to do that change. And you know, and Alice's point was, I think, spot on. I mean, in other words, if the if let's say this is coming from a workforce group assessment, or if this is coming from a business process assessment or a technology assessment, if they were doing their job, they would, and defining that future, they would have tied it to the purpose and the vision. They would have identified whether leadership was involved. They would have identified who stakeholders needed to be involved in the change process and so forth, but we haven't documented that. So I think Alice's comments were, you know, really good, because in order, and you're looking at the changes you're doing, Alice, and you're saying, are we really ready to do this? And it's almost like the questions in that assessment for change. It's almost, if you look at those questions or statements of readiness is another way to look at it. It's almost like a checklist of things that we need to make sure that are covered before we do the change. And that's you know, kind of the way I interpreted what Alice was talking about. But hey, hats off, Cello, to the way that you brought all this together, because it really is a culmination of several years worth of work, that where each of these teams is off doing their own, you know, assessments, but trying to bring it together and enable the utility to make these changes is really hard work. And a final comment, and then I'll shut up, is that often what we're talking about when we get to that change point is having almost a chartering type of meeting to do what Alice was talking about, where you're basically saying, is it clear what the purpose is, what the change is, what the process steps are, and have we really defined what we want to improve and where we want to be, and have we done that groundwork? So that's my final comment, and we see that Michael has his hand up.
Phil, apologize if I'm bringing up old stuff, as it sounds like I come in kind of late in the process, but I think this is really good. I think the process mapping is a pretty key part. It identifies potential impacts to what we're trying to do. I don't know if you all have talked about it, but other impacts, like, does this impact technology? Is there a potential impact to talent and ability? Like, what are the training needs going to come up? And then also, does it impact structure and the organizational structure and all that? And then the other one, I know I'm saying a lot, the other one would be, once you've identified the stakeholders through process mapping, is there somewhere that we've talked about stakeholder analysis and individual, like, you know, stakeholders' concerns, their interests and all that?
That's an excellent point, Michael. Excuse me. And actually, this is a very good question. The one key aspect of what we're trying to do and how we want to go about it is to apply a, quote, systems thinking approach, to consider not just a single thing one at a time, but how do they interact with each other, which is directly related to your question.
Right.
So, for example, if you come to that stage gate and you find out, you know, many projects, you know, start because somebody goes to a conference and sees like a piece of software or sees a really wonderful truck to do something. And then, you know, pretty soon the focus is on technology. And when we surveyed the people here on this team, like in your organization, what is the first thing that they think about? They say, okay, the first thing they think about is technology. And when we asked them what is what causes what is the critical factor for success, technology ranked last, because they said you can find it. You know, I mean, it's not like you can't find it. So this question that you have is critical. And I actually, so let's say you come to this stage, you see that employee engagement is low, that you're trying to look at the process that is very complicated, involves a lot of people. And on the technology side, you say, you know what, we're not even collecting the data that we need for this process. Then probably one needs to maybe scale, you know, start with a smaller piece, a sub-process or something. So these types of discussions would be part of right at that point where Alice has said, you know, like the stage gate to decide how are we going to attack this. Your question about analyzing stakeholders is very good, but it's also very sensitive. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I know I've seen it. I don't know that our tools provide currently a foolproof way to address that. My own bias would be to say, let's say, Michael, you decided where to start this, which process to start with. I think that you would have a sense that to start with something that you know in your organization has a higher likelihood of success, even if it's a more limited scope, because you know the people who are engaged. So there's not a formal way to address that. But I think, so let's say you say, where do I want to pilot this? And then you can say, you know, I probably don't want to do this in procurement, but I maybe want to do this in the inspecting pump stations or something that I know that people are going to be excited about it. I can get people on board. So it's not formally part of this, but I recognize that it would have to be, you know, that would be a very important part. Am I answering your question at all?
I think so, but whatever I've seen is change management. Like you got so I'll just take a step back. I'd say project management is basically managing to be on time, on budget, and on scope, versus change management is managing the people aspect of it. I think omitting a stakeholder analysis is basically kind of omitting the people side of it. I think the whole process part is great, and it's critical to identify people, but then you have to get the pulse of the people and kind of manage people's feelings and thoughts about the things and their understanding of the process and where we're trying to get to.
Yes.
About that stakeholder analysis piece,
let me see if this would help.
It's touchy in many organizations, but I think without that piece, that's really what we're trying to manage with change management. I've always understood.
Yes, let me see if this would help. And this is, I will share what we're currently doing on the people side. Let me know when you see my screen.
It's there.
Yes. Have you seen this? So what we're doing currently on the people side is that we have an assessment tool that looks at, this one has the 6 components: organizational strategy and performance, organizational values, responsibility, accountability, reward and recognition, and it would be applied to all the stakeholders. And so we have that in place, this survey, and we have an analytical tool that then takes the results, and each one of these things, let's say organizational strategy and performance, has 3 questions, and these are the results that I mean, this is the legend for, you know, what the color, like what are these results, what range are you in? So this then is like the dashboard overall where we are with these different aspects. And then you could dig in, let's say, into organizational strategy and performance specifically, and you could
So-
see what the questions are.
Jello,
And
can I jump
sorry,
in just
go
for a
ahead.
sec?
Go,
Yeah,
Alice.
sorry,
Go,
I don't
Alice.
mean to jump the queue, but I think there's a very important thing that Michael is bringing up that I think we hadn't done in the people assessment. So I really appreciate this point being made. That when you go back to the categories, if you show all of them again for a sec, I think all of the questions we've designed, while we've asked them to be asked of the people who will be involved in this particular change, they didn't ask that one thing, Michael, that you said, is that what are your concerns with this particular change we're going to do? That I think we are missing, Cello and Scott.
Okay.
And so I think we need to think about that. Do we go back and change sort of the people survey that we have envisioned, or does that need to go into the change management survey? And so I think that is an important element that I really appreciate being brought into this that is missing.
Okay. Well, where do you think, do you think that it would fit into one of these categories, or do we need a new category?
Or is it part of the stage gate process where that you were talking about, Alice, where, you know, when you think you've identified the change that's needed, a particular change, then you basically get people together and you really talk about what their biggest concerns are, and make sure that that's included. I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if it maybe goes into the change management assessment, because
Yeah.
after you've gotten all this, like in general, are people engaged? The people involved we're talking about engaged and feel like they can see things honestly. Then the next step is, okay, and what are your concerns about this particular change, and what could go well and what could not go well and that type of thing. That's just my thought.
I think there's a second part to that line of questioning as well, which is when you're talking with those stakeholders, not because you've identified a need for a change, but then you get into the people that are actually working in that process day to day, and not only what their concerns are, but okay, we're doing this change, we're planning on doing this change. What would you like to get out of it as well? Like how would you like to see this process work at the end of the day? Or how would you like to see this new tool help you in your day to day? Like, so they're not just their concerns, but their objective or their interests, because what the senior manager might see as the ideal thing might not be the same as what the person who's doing the work.
One thing to know, Michael, is that as part of the design of the process, you're including stakeholders there. It's not just some manager who says, here's how we want to do things in the future. So to some extent, that would be included. But also important, and what we're learning at this stage, as we have all these assessments, because we have these different groups who've gone off and done this assessment and that assessment, is that the integration of those things is so important, and it's come up in this meeting. So we're talking about change, and we're a particular process that we're going to change, and we would have already designed what the to-be process is and involve stakeholders in that. But have we assessed the culture of that group to make sure that we're covering the interests of the cultural aspects of the people involved, like you're saying? Have we included the technology that Joel or somebody brought up as well? So the people, process, the technology really need to be integrated together in order to have effective change, or at least it would be optimal if you did so. Not everybody might do it completely, but to do it optimally, you'd actually go through each one of those assessments and then make sure with the appropriate stakeholders, and you'd make sure that we've covered those bases, some of which you're talking about.
Yeah.
Michael, would you be agreeable to if we set up a call and we can go into detail on this, and then you can help me? I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry for derailing.
No, it's not derailing. No, this is why we have these
Excellent.
meetings. This is not derailing. But what I'm trying to say is, if you could, maybe we could discuss it, and maybe you could help us understand how we can include this concern, the valid concern that you have, where it best fits, so that it becomes, that it gets folded into, the stuff that we're doing. And I'm the first one to admit that we don't see this as something that's written in stone. This is, we're starting a journey, and these are complicated things. So if you could help us figure out how to include that valid concern, that would be very, very valuable.
Michael and Joel, it's probably just my old age memory, because maybe I should know this, but can you indicate what utilities you're from? Because there may be some other people that have been involved in some different aspects of this as well.
I'm at Denver Metro.
Yeah.
Metro Water Recovery.
Yeah.
I am in St. Paul, Minnesota with the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services, so wastewater treatment.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's helpful because we haven't really had, the other Denver folks, engaged at MCES. We actually have had a lot of engagement, but not as fully as we'd like in any utility. So that's real helpful.
Yeah, so especially, there's a bit of a history to this, several years of stuff. So I'd be really, really keen to, do everything I can, and Scott as well, to see how we can, get you plugged in, so you can provide more of these types of comments, and that we can include these things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that, it's like Scott said earlier, it's three years of work in the culmination of taking a bunch of different inputs and parts and pieces and pulling it all together for the day. But I think having some new folks on here, like Denver, like Minneapolis, provides insights that maybe we missed in the last 3 years, right? So that's always a positive thing, and that's what the whole WISE program is about, is getting wiser. So
Yeah.
We knew that we were going to get to this stage too, by the way. We said change management, get ready for it, because in order to actually make the improvements that we're talking about, it requires this change. And, so we're finally there. And so this kind of insights that you all are providing is so helpful.
Yeah, that'll be great. So let me see. I think Joel had to leave, but are there any other thoughts and comments? I will send after this call. I will send. Ramona is the lead for this effort from Baltimore. But I will send out or either she or I will send out an email with links to the slide deck, to the guidelines, to the mural pages, and the video of this call. So and Michael, I'd be really. I'll send you a separate email just to see when we can get together, and you can kind of catch up a little bit with what we've been doing in the past and help us out. Sorry.
Yeah, Cello, maybe we just want to, because we do have a little bit of time, but what about Tamika and Maria Luisa and Philip? Did you have any observations or reactions, feedback to what you've heard today?
This is Philip Scott. Thank you. I don't have any reactions at the moment, but Cello did say he's going to send the information out. I will share that information with Marco, and if we have some feedback going forward, I'll definitely share that in later meetings.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what about Tamika and Maria Luisa?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm from Metro Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. I just wanted, yeah, we have been implementing, in a way, a big initiative in our organization because of a regulatory compliance. And I was one of those leading that initiative. And what we did, we just developed the processes, we mapped them out using flowcharts and so on, and then train everyone about those things. And because it's a regulatory compliance, they are all expected to follow those processes. It's like I'm doing change management at the same time, but I know I have not really followed what you have shown, like doing a maturity assessment and so on. Now I wanted to know how this change management process would apply to what we have been implementing. Would it be like for the sustainment of of those processes that we implemented? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, well, those, you know, there are those steps in improvement that are really actually are represented in a circle, which means that if you, so it's not.
When do you check act?
Yeah, it's not really a line. It was only because I needed real estate on the slide, but it's actually a circle that goes around. So when you make one change, then you monitor, see, and then you go back and say, okay, did it help at all? Where are we now? And then you kind of go, you know, go around and in that continuous improvement cycle. So depending on where you are in your, you know, planning or implementation efforts would be that, you know, that's where the answer would be which part of this methodology or these tools would be applicable, you know.
Yeah, and I'd just add that, you know, what we're saying in a perfect world, you would basically apply the people, process, technology assessments, and then the change management process that we're laying out. But the fact is Maria Luisa, you're in the middle already of doing one of these things. So I don't know, but you might decide, for example, that, well, I want to go back and look at these assessment tools and in these different areas, including change management, and say, have I covered, you know, all my bases in those areas? If you've already in the middle of it, you know, with Kansas City, for example, who's actually very far down the line in doing work process changes. It wasn't regulatory compliance, it was CIP, but it's the same idea. Well, we're saying you might want to go, they did that before we had the assessment tool prepared. And so you might want to go back and look at that assessment tool, and you could actually contribute to our effort two ways. One, you can say, have I covered all the things? The other would be to say, well, these are some lessons that we learned, and you might want to enhance your tool to cover this particular aspect. So your engagement would be really helpful. But you could take the team, or you as an individual could go look at these assessment tools and look at change management specifically and say, did we cover these different aspects? Or what would we do next time, you know, with a different process in order to improve what we're doing? Because Metro Vancouver has been quite involved, you know, in different teams and has done a lot of this, but not, you know, holistically with all the different assessments. So
probably we can participate more. I know I'm implementing again a change because, as you know, I'm following the plan, do, check, act cycle.
yeah,
The employees are now implementing the processes. Now I
yes,
have to check, which means I will do an audit. This is a new process again that will
yeah,
be introduced, and then improvements.
yeah, yeah. So it could fit that way, just in your process like that. This could be a good check step, and then you could re-engage around those areas of opportunity.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, I guess we're saving the best for last. Hi, I'm Tamika Mitchell. I also agree with Alice about capturing the people's feedback, probably in a different subsection, because I think if you take the history of their issues or their problems, you can sometimes use that in a different project for as a lessons learned to do a read across. So I think probably capturing their feedback or just even their ups and downs or whatever in some type of different format will probably help with the project moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that thought. So that was really all we wanted to cover today. And if you would like to help us shape these questions, and if you look at the guidelines, you have any problems getting into the mural, let me know. We'll figure it out. We'll help you. We'd like to kind of get this version 1.0 wrapped up. If we need to change it later, that's fine. But so that we can, so that some organization can start testing it in the field and conducting these things and testing them out. Any other questions before we wrap
Just
it up?
like you said, Cello, making this available, making it clear where people can access this,
Yes.
you know, your presentation and those files you were talking about.
Yes, I will send out either me or either I or Ramona will send out an update that says we had a meeting. This is where the materials are. This is where the recording is, and provide a little bit of a summary. So you'll have links to all of these things. And let me just stop the recording so I don't